You know, lately, the MCU really hasn't been doing that great. Sure, every now and then, you might get a movie with enough gimmicks and Easter eggs in it to drum up interest, like Deadpool and Wolverine, but all you have to do is look at the numbers and see that interest in the brand is sinking faster than the Titanic.
Hold on! I love you! I love you!
Which brings us to Captain America Brave New World, a movie that's been given the impossible task of getting audiences hyped up for the MCU in 2025, while at the same time overcoming all the production issues that have plagued the movie from the very beginning. So, will Captain America 4 manage to overcome 1 name change, 3 release date changes, 4 rounds of reshoots, and start the MCU movie season off with a bang? Or will it be more like this? Well, let's find out as we take a spoiler-free look at Captain America Brave New World. So, Captain America Brave New World starts like any great movie with a presidential election. And it's here that we see General Thunderbolt Ross as he makes an acceptance speech after winning the White House, which just goes to prove that even in a fake reality, Americans love voting for old people. Anyway, like all presidents, he wants to make sure that his first 100 days in office are one for the history books. So he proposes a new treaty that will give countries across the world equal share of a valuable new resource called adamantium, an indestructible material that was found inside the dead celestial mass that's been sticking out of the Indian Ocean for 5 years.
What?
Oh, you didn't see the Eternals? Well, don't feel too bad because no one else did either. Anyway, during a meeting of world leaders at the White House, things go horribly wrong when former super soldier Isaiah Bradley succumbs to mind control and tries to kill the president, resulting in him getting arrested and Sam promising to find out who's behind the attack, even though the government has told him to stay out of the situation. Hold on, let's pause for a second. A movie where Captain America has to go against the government and clear the name of a friend of his who was framed for trying to kill a world leader? Why does this sound so familiar? So, despite this order, Sam and the new Falcon, Joaquin Torres, set out to find who's responsible for the attack and find themselves in a globe-trotting adventure where no one can be trusted and the fate of the world is at stake. And when it's all said and done, the movie we end up with is, well, just bad. It has a clunky, uninteresting script full of half-baked ideas and poorly thought-out plot points, action scenes that are slow and clumsy, a generic villain with a mind-numbingly stupid plan, and visual effects that are so bad it's embarrassing to watch. When it comes to the script, it's terribly unfocused, not knowing if it wants to be a follow-up to Falcon and the Winter Soldier or a sequel to The Incredible Hulk. However, what should have been obvious to a room of professional writers is that doing both doesn't work. I mean, if your movie has to start with a massive exposition dump that explains the events of previous movies just so your story can make sense to the audience, then you failed at making a movie, and that is certainly the case here.
Yeah, well, that's just like, your opinion, man.
Previous Captain America movies have been known for their fight choreography. The elevator fight in Winter Soldier is still regarded as a high point of the franchise. However, Captain America Brave New World will certainly be known for being the weakest of all of them, as we get the pleasure of seeing Sam struggle to take down even the most insignificant of henchmen. Now, some will say that this makes sense for the character because Sam isn't a super soldier, so naturally he would be slower and not as strong as Steve Rogers was. Except the issue isn't with Sam taking a lot of damage or being slower than Steve. The issue is with the execution of the fights themselves. There are many times that you can see guys with guns purposely closing the distance so they can get punched, or guys waiting for their turn to get punched, and so on. Granted, not every piece of fight choreography is bad. Most of it is at least passable, but the parts of it that are bad really stick out, and it's hard to miss. As far as the main villain goes, I won't say who he is for the sake of spoilers, but believe me when I say he's about as generic as Walmart brand soda, and his master plan is so incredibly stupid that it boggles the mind, and that plan is tricking President Ross into becoming the Red Hulk so that he can prove that he's a bad father. Nope, I'm not making that up. That is the bad guy's primary motivation behind global destabilization, making sure that the president's daughter won't return his phone calls.
That's dumb.
Finally, the visual effects in this movie are absolutely awful, to the point where many of them seem unfinished. And the best way that I can describe them is with this photo that I made in Photoshop. There are moments of this movie that look exactly like this. Now, you're probably thinking that I'm being hyperbolic or silly. There's no way that a movie with a budget of nearly $200 million would produce something that looks this bad. But sadly, I'm not joking at all. And if this was one shot, I could probably let that slide. However, there are entire scenes that look like this. I honestly don't know why they would release this movie when the effects are obviously not finished, but they did, and it's astonishing to see. Of course, all these issues really come down to one thing, and that's all the reshoots that the movie had to go through, which were apparently used to reshape the plot, add all of Giancarlo Esposito's scenes,
Giancarlo Esposito,
and add more context to the movie. Now, reshoots are commonplace in movie making. In fact, it would be hard to find a single movie produced by a major studio that doesn't have any. However, if those reshoots are so poorly executed that they stick out like a sore thumb and lower the overall quality of the film, it becomes a problem. And that's exactly the case with Captain America: Brave New World, a movie where adding context apparently means shooting a bunch of scenes with two people standing next to each other while explaining in great detail various plot elements. Plot elements that really should have been easy to handle because, as I mentioned earlier, they already happened in Civil War, but to Steve Rogers. With all that said, I think the biggest issue that I have with this movie is that it's incredibly boring, so much so that it would actually benefit by being as bad as Madam Web. I know that sounds strange, but at least then it would give people something to talk about. Instead, there's nothing memorable or interesting about Captain America: Brave New World at all. In fact, by next week, I'm sure most people will have forgotten that it even exists. So, at the end of the day, would I recommend this movie? No, not at all. I mean, if you already have a Disney Plus subscription and you just have time to kill, then catch it there. Otherwise, just skip it. There's nothing in this movie worth seeing, let alone going to the theater to see it.
I love myself. The world is a ghetto.